Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? That's a phrase that you've probably heard before. In fact, many of you may even know where that comes from. In the popular fairy tale of Snow White, there is a queen, and every day that queen looks in the mirror and she asks that same question, who is the fairest of them all? And each and every day, the magical mirror responds to the queen, while you, queen, you are the fairest. You are the most beautiful in all of the land. Until one day. You see, one day that same queen stands before her same magical mirror and asks her same question, who is the fairest of them all? Only on this day, she gets a different response. The mirror basically says, you know, queen, there is this other girl, and she is more beautiful even than you. Of course, the queen doesn't like that very much. Now, the reality is most of us have probably never stood in front of the mirror and said that exact same thing, who is the fairest of them all? But if we're honest with ourselves, every single day, most of us do something very, very similar. You see, we begin to look at ourselves and ask ourselves that question, how do I measure up? How do I compare? Where do I fit in? Genesis 1:27 tells us that we were created in the image of God. In fact, Psalm 139:14 says that we were fearfully and wonderfully made. And Ephesians 2:10 tells us that we are God's workmanship, His masterpiece. But in spite of all of these things that God has given us in His Word to tell us the value and worth that He sees that we have, sometimes instead of listening to God, we listen to other things. We listen to the world around us, and the world around us is not always so kind. You see, this world is full of deception and illusion. In fact, one of the things the world loves to do is steer you away from what God says and tell you something completely different. We begin to listen to what the world says. We begin to look in the mirror and sometimes wonder, am I smart enough? Am I tall enough? Am I skinny enough? Am I rich enough? Or maybe you're too tall, you're too skinny, you're too rich, you're too smart. One way or another, we all question, am I enough? You see, too often we do look in that mirror and we don't like what we see. 1 Samuel 16:7 tells us that man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And even though we know that what God cares about most is what's going on inside of our lives, sometimes we do let all of those things that other people say really affect our self-image and who we believe ourselves to be. We look in the mirror and after a while we don't like what we see. Because what we see looking back at ourselves is us. You see, we know our shortcomings. We know our faults. We know the areas that we just feel like maybe we don't measure up. And sometimes what we would prefer to do is not let anybody truly see us for who we are. What we would prefer to do is just simply cover all of that up. We would rather hide ourselves from the world around us and somehow think that if maybe we could separate ourselves enough, we won't have to listen to those condemning words that people do say. People you barely know who somehow have taken it upon themselves and feel it's their obligation and their responsibility to let you know that your life doesn't matter. Maybe people even that you do know, people that you're supposed to trust more than anybody else, your own friends and family who have left you feeling broken and hurt because of the words that they've said to you. See, you've heard it said that sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And the reality is that is a lie. Because the fact is that words do hurt. And sometimes people do say things to us and they leave us broken. They leave us hurt. In fact, sometimes those things that people say to us, those words that people say, they truly leave us broken. They leave us shattered. It feels as if our life has fallen to pieces because of the words that people have said. You see, sometimes what happens in this world is people say things to us and people do things to us that leave us feeling empty and leave us feeling broken. And sometimes it feels as if the only chance that we have is to cover all of that up, to not allow people to see us for who we are. You see, here's the amazing thing. You see, sometimes in the middle of all of our brokenness, in the middle of all of that hurt that we faced, in the middle of all of those things that the world has said that leaves us feeling broken and shattered, sometimes what we need to do more than anything else is simply be willing to get on our knees before God, to be able to pick up those broken pieces of our life, to bring those broken pieces to Him. You see, the fact is that if we are willing to bring our brokenness to Jesus, He can do some amazing things. In fact, in Psalm 147, verse 3, it says that He heals the brokenhearted. He binds their wounds. You see, the amazing truth that you can know is this: no matter what you have faced in your life, no matter what it is that has left you feeling empty, lonely, broken, shattered, you can know this truth. That you can begin to see yourself the way that Jesus sees yourself. You can begin to discover who you are in Him. And when you do, you'll be able to pull back the curtain and look behind the mirror and realize that you truly are His masterpiece. You'll be able to pull back the curtain, look in the mirror and love what you see when you realize that you truly were fearfully, wonderfully, and beautifully made.